Hello my soccer universe. I kind of hinted at it at the end of the review video of the first legs that maybe some of the ties might get way more exciting than they seem now after the first leg, because the general feeling was all ties are over, and yes, all the teams that were leading after the first leg also advanced, but at least two were really surviving a big scare. I'm talking of course about PSG, who at one point had a 5-1 aggregate lead, and Aston Villa almost packed them back and took them to overtime, and with some luck, and if Donnarumma would not have had a great day, they may have even won it in regulation. And of course Inter against Bayern. I mean, Bayern always get at least a point out of the San Siro when they play Inter. Was also a tight one, but in the end the more clever team went through. I also have to say I was really disappointed by the Spanish teams. Barcelona really did not know how to handle this 4-0 lead against Dortmund, and on a different day Dortmund actually could have taken them to overtime as well. So a huge valiant effort by Dortmund, and this was a Dortmund team that has been twice outplayed by Barcelona already. However, the biggest disappointment was of course Real Madrid. I mean, you didn't show up in the first leg, you deservedly so lost 3-0. It could have gone even worse than the entire week. The only word we heard coming out of Madrid was remontada, remontada, we gonna do it at the Bernabeu, and then you're just not showing up again. Arsenal actually quite easily managed this tie, and for me this really, if you talk the talk, then you have to walk the walk. I mean, the only thing that Real Madrid did was walk. I mean, look at Vinny Jr., look at Mbappe. There was almost no effort. It also shows now that in modern football you cannot afford having players walking around the pitch. Everyone has to work for each other. Look at PSG up until that second half against Villa, where we have now a team that has very skillful players, but everyone is working for each other. To a lesser degree also Barcelona, and for sure this also works for Arsenal and Inter, where everyone is putting in a shift. I also find it a little bit funny that Mbappe left PSG become a better team, he goes to Real Madrid become a worse team. Is it a long trend? I don't think so, but I think there needs to be a major realization among the big stars and also among the big clubs that this is not the winning way, having just stars that show up. They sell shirts, but that's all they do, and maybe score a lot of goals against smaller opponents. I would say, before we get lost in more talk about that, let's review all the action from Tuesday and Wednesday. At halftime in the return leg, the tie between Aston Villa and PSG seemed more or less over. PSG in the first half launched 2 counterattacks, and yes, Villa put a lot of spirit in there, but it every time seems that PSG, if they want it, they can click into the next gear and score a goal. Happened in the 11th minute when Hakimi finished a counterattack where also Emi Martinez spilled the ball more or less to her team, and then another nice counterattack in 27th minute where Dembele plays it over to Nuno Mendes, and it's 2-0. 5-1 on aggregate. It is done and dusted. Or was it? No. Tielemans at least pulled one back. It was badly deflected by Pacho, also has to be said, and that kept Villa sorta kinda just about in the game, but they needed another goal, and that came then in the 55th minute, and all hell broke loose. John McGinn just darted through midfield onto the goal, unleashes a shot, again deflected by Pacho, slightly though, into the net in the 55th minute, and suddenly there was this big lift coming for Villa. Donnarumma made a huge save on Rashford that caused then a corner kick, and from that corner kick, so Rashford then assists Konsa, and it is 3-2, so only one goal left. More heroics from Donnarumma again, denying Rashford, making a great save on a Pau Torres header. And at that point it really seemed that all that PSG could do is keep possession and keep Villa away from their own goal without ever having a threat. At this point it seemed very much possible that Villa is gonna get the equalizer on aggregate and actually might win it in overtime as well. PSG were dead in the water. Maybe also because they only made a single substitution in the entire game, whereas Unai Emery threw everything at PSG. Rashford was outstanding, however he had to come off. I guess he was gassed in the 76th minute for Oli Watkins, and at that point then the game had settled down again a little bit, but there was one last big chance, a shot by Ian Madsen deep in stoppage time that Pacho just blocks before it reaches the goal. And so PSG very much survive a huge scare, and all credit to Villa of making this tie that seemed more or less over a real fun one to watch. Barcelona also had a hard time managing the 4-0 lead from the first leg. I mean, yes, they saved quite a few players, rotated the squad, however, they were never really on the field, and on a different day, this could have gone to overtime. Very much so. Sergio Guirassy scores a hat-trick, and probably he should have even opened the scoring already in the second minute. Then they get the penalty, and it seemed very much game on. Barcelona only a few attacks, and they were very badly played. I mean, especially Rafinha seemed to be off his step, and also Lamine Yamal was not really in the game. 49th minute, Sergio Guirassy heads it in for the 2-0, and that very much meant game on. However, Fermin Lopez cross is then deflected in by Benzabeni to make it 2-1, and at that point I was thinking, yeah, sigh of relief. Barcelona will go through. I wanted Barcelona to go through. And by the way, can I just say, Barcelona may not have won in this configuration, but I love white pants with the Barcelona jersey. That looks actually really, really, really nice. But credit where credit is due for Dortmund. I mean, they never gave up. They get the 3-1 in the 76th minute, and then they were pushing for a little bit more. But you know, the longer the game went on, the more you knew they need 2 goals, and that never was going to happen. So while it was a little scare, Barcelona in the end go through. Inter against Bayern was easily the best overall tie of all the quarterfinals, and despite Inter having a 2-1 lead, you always had the feeling that Bayern could actually make an upset. In fact, Inter never have won against Bayern at home, and at least that streak was preserved. In the end, Inter go through because they were just more ruthless and more solid on the back without being really convincing on the back either. In the first half, Bayern very much had the run of the play, however, Inter dictated from defense how the game is gonna be played. I mean, they launched always dangerous counterattacks and seemed to be more threatening on these than Bayern were in front of goal. Yes, there was a great triple chance just before the halftime break, but a Bayern player never could get a shot off. Other than that, it was just wide range shot opportunities. So I always felt that Inter have this game a little bit under control. That, however, changed in the 52nd minute when Goretzka finds Kane, and Kane has all the time in the box to pick his corner, and it is 2-2 on aggregate and very much game on. And at this moment I thought that Bayern have the upper hand, and Thomas Müller could have given them the lead when Olise ran on the right side, passes it over, 2 Bayern players in the middle miss it or were not well positioned. However, Thomas Müller had a really great shot, not as great as the one that Harry Kane missed in the first leg, but if he gets that one on goal, that's very much advantage Bayern. And then came the 3 minutes of horror, as it's called now in Bavaria, where after a corner kick, Lautaro Martinez takes a shot, it's blocked by Kimmich, and he cannot get his legs sorted, so Lautaro very quickly unleashes another shot through Kimmich. It's 1-1 and 3-2 Inter on aggregate, and suddenly Inter had very much the upper hand. Darmian probably should have already given Inter the lead on the night, however it was then from the ensuing corner when Pavard heads in. Pavard, of course, a former Bayern Munich player, and at that moment Bayern seemed to be down and out. Company then makes some changes. He takes off Leroy Sané and Kim, he brings on Gnabry and Guerrero, and Bayern at least tried, while Inter felt very comfortable on the back. The game got a little bit reignited again when Gnabry corner was then headed in by Dyer from a very difficult angle. 2-2 on the night, and from that moment on Inter were really more or less trying to see it out, and there was desperation attacks by Bayern on and on. However, only one really good opportunity in there. In the end, I think the more clever team wins. It was a typical Italy versus Germany matchup where the Italians were just more clever than the Germans, who were really not solid in defense, and that cost them. And also, not having Musiala probably not really an advantage. For all the talk about a remontada at the Bernabeu, Real Madrid definitely did not walk the walk. In the first half, it seemed so disorganized and lackluster what Real Madrid were showing. You know, this is the team that really needed to go for it. In fact, it was Arsenal that earned a penalty, but Bukayo Saka decides to Panenka it, and it was an easy save for Courtois, and actually was quite happy about that one. I mean, if you do a Panenka, go down the middle, not onto the goalie. There was also another penalty situation where Rice seemingly had brought down Mbappe, but Mbappe was just falling over, which was basically the best thing he did all evening long. In the second half, more of the same. There was really no spark from Real Madrid, and it's Bukayo Saka, after a really nicely played attack, great Merino assist, that finishes it to give Arsenal the 1-0 lead. And then just from the kickoff, Raya plays it over to Saliba. He's pressed by Vinny, and it's kind of a little bit the revenge of what happened in the first leg, and Vinny can put it in the empty net. Why Raya did not move back in the goal, I did not really understand. And you always feel that for Real Madrid, just this goal could ignite the spark. There was nothing. There was absolutely nothing. Yes, I give them, they at least tried, but it was not cohesive. The strikers didn't really want to run. It did not seem organized, whereas Arsenal actually defended this quite easily home and get in the winning goal through Martinelli. Again, Merino assisting that one in stoppage time. Arsenal fully deservedly going through, the only team that was not shaky moving on to the semis. And so we have two very interesting semifinals set up. We have Arsenal against PSG. Arsenal beat PSG in the league phase easily 2-0 at home, where PSG really didn't show up. So that might be interesting for sure. And then Barcelona against Inter. I mean, that is a Champions League classic. Meanwhile, none bigger than the 2010 semi-final where Inter overcame this Barcelona side. However, this time it is Barcelona who have the first leg at home. Probably the Barca-Inter tie is the more intriguing one to me, because those are very contrasting styles, as you would expect. Barcelona, the free-flowing, high-pressing side, high line side at least, whereas Inter kind of like to sit back and hit you on the counter attack and are really a team that thrives in being the underdog. Well, my model has them at 50-50 at the moment, which kind of seems alright, because Barcelona have looked really great over the past weeks. However, in this last week, not so much. I guess they don't really know how to handle being in the Champions League and so on. And there's also a Copa del Rey final against the Real Madrid played in between. So not the best scheduling for Barcelona. I think quality-wise, Barcelona is probably the better team. However, when I look at this Inter defense and how they can put in a shift and how Inzaghi is managing it, I can see Inter meeting Barcelona level and even causing an upset. Arsenal against PSG, I think, are very similar teams. Spanish coaches. I'm not sure who I would say. I said after PSG beat Liverpool that I would favor PSG to win the Champions League. I would think Arsenal might as well be their antidote. So very intriguing semi-final, but I think they will meet on level terms. The bookies have PSG as the favorites. However, thanks to the ELO rating, my model actually has Arsenal as the favorite. And as for the overall favorites, if Arsenal is the favorite over PSG, they're of course also favorites to win. It's really, really level overall. Inter slightly ahead of Barcelona, take it for what it is. I think it's very much a toss-up. I think all four teams are very level, and it will be interesting of who will come out on top. Although I really think that Arsenal is probably the worst opponent for PSG to meet. That's the one thing, and the same thing is true for Inter, is the worst opponent that Barcelona could meet. So Arsenal against Inter final? When will those semifinals be played? Well, the first leg, 29th of April, Arsenal against PSG, and then a day later, Barcelona take on Inter. The return legs then a week later, 6th and 7th of May. And we will see who will play the final in Munich. It will be no final at home for Bayern, so it will be a neutrals final. I really like that we have 4 teams from 4 different countries. That really feels well. So those are my thoughts on the return legs. One interesting thing is that 3 of the 4 semifinalists actually finished in 2, 3 and 4 in the league phase. So they did really well in the league phase and took advantage of that. And the only one that's not is PSG, who actually ousted the number 1 team. So probably earned them also this spot in the semifinal. I repeat myself, it's a very intriguing semifinal. I cannot really tell. I could make an argument for almost all of the 4 teams to move on to the final. In any case, please let me know your thoughts. Who will move on to the final? Give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video. Subscribe to my channel if you want to see more videos like these. I'll talk to you soon about more things in my soccer universe. Bye! Hey there, I really hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, here are some videos and playlists that you may enjoy too. Also, please consider subscribing to my channel and hit the little bell icon so you get notified whenever something happens in my soccer universe. And with that, have a wonderful day. Bye!